You're listening to the Teach Better Talk podcast featuring expert educators eager to share progressive tactics to reach more students. Teach Better Talk is created by teachers and fueled by passion. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 94 of Teach Better Talk. I'm Ray Hewart, and I guess you already knew that. And as always, I am with the astonishing Jeff Gargis.
Astonishing. I think we've used that one before.
I wanted to go with astonishing with Jess Hamilton because she has been so active on our Facebook and she listens to our podcast all the time. And I just love celebrating our listeners. So when they send in words, I don't care if I use them twice. I think it's awesome.
So Jess sent in the word. Where she do that? She's on Facebook. Do we have their Twitter handle too, or no?
I don't have Jess's Twitter handle, but she is over on Facebook. I think that she's a part of our Facebook group, Teach Better Team private group. So I just think that it's so cool that we not only have educators that are a part of like our podcast and our blogs and our Twitter chats, but all the other elements like Facebook and stuff like that too. It's kind of cool, Jeff.
Well, Jess, thank you so much for the kind word. I really appreciate that. And anyone else who's listening, if you are listening, you want to give Ray a word. And honestly, I don't care if it's kind. I appreciate kind words, but they can be whatever words you want. Make sure you tweet at Ray Hewart or find us in our Facebook group, which you just got to search Teach Better Team. We've got several thousand teachers from all over the world to share some amazing advice, a lot of collaboration. And we may or may not have a bunch of free PD that goes on in that group as well. So very, very cool. Thank you, Jess. Appreciate that.
That'd be really good. I loved this episode, Jeff. Do you think that I was too dorky telling her how much I loved this episode?
No, I always think you're too dorky. No, that's not true.
Thanks,
I think you're
Jeff.
super cool, actually. No, I felt it. It was actually great. I'm actually excited for everyone to hear how just excited and into the episode you were. But I think that just shows the power of what this episode brings and talking and stuff. So she was bringing up topics that I feel like hit a nerve, which is, those core values that we have for the Teach Better team. When anybody starts talking about those core values, I feel like I get all amped up, like I just drank like an energy drink or a full cup of coffee, because they speak my language. And her focus was all on feedback. And I know you know this, Jeff, but our Facebook group has been ridiculous the past few weeks talking about feedback. Mm-hmm. And so when this came up, I was like, oh man, here we go again, like big, awesome topic. And I don't know if you felt this way, but I just was jumping out of my seat. I did. And that's why I want to talk about feedback right now, because I know it's something that you talk about a lot. You've done some of the PD. You talk about it a ton when we're talking about just grading and assessment and standards-based and just everything that we do. It's such an important part of what you do as a teacher in your classroom. So let's take a couple minutes here and hear your side of feedback of why it's so important, what does it mean to you, and then sort of how that guides into this episode and all the things that Christine were talking about.
Sure. I mean, Christine will tell you her story. She really built her philosophy on feedback based on what her students vocalize they need. And that's how every phenomenal thing is built in the classroom. In our private group, we just had a really rich discussion that was very spur of the moment. It wasn't even scheduled, but I went live in our group after one of our free summer series videos because we had a post that was actually posted by Candace, who's an amazing educator, a part of our group, where she was trying to build her syllabus for the year focused on grading. And there was all this, I mean, no kidding, like 40 plus comments on this post within 3 days, because there was this back and forth conversation around how you weight things in the grade book, how you put things in the grade book, how limiting the grade book feels. And it was really interesting to read. But for me, this was the week I had surgery. So I was reading them, but not very active in the conversation. I was almost disappointed that the conversation was focused on the grade book rather than this idea of feedback with our students, because, I mean, geez, the grade book is almost irrelevant. If you're giving effective feedback, the grade book is so minor. You know, you want your students to constantly be growing. I don't care what that final grade looks like. That so comes later, I guess. I'm not sure how to explain that well. But I went live with actually a huge number of educators. It was amazing how many people decided to join us to have this rich conversation around feedback being the most important tool you have in your classroom and the most important role for any progressive educator. And it really sparked from educators saying they didn't have time to give feedback, which Christine even noted. It takes a lot of time to have a conversation with the student that's meaningful, to write comments, handwrite comments on students' paper, students' work. So what do? Does that mean that we don't give effective feedback? Is it just a losing battle, or is it something we can fix? And well, obviously for the Teach Better team, we claim we can absolutely fix it. And we have a ton of ways for educators to start that process. Christine is a huge contributor to finding that solution. I think that she has really great, innovative ways to be better at that. So whether you're listening to this episode and you take the time to really soak in Christine's insight, I encourage you to listen to it like 2 or 3 times. Or if you want to go to our Facebook group later on and listen to our conversation there. It was just super interesting to have that conversation, because just within that 40-minute live stream, I think we shifted a lot of teachers' focuses from, well, I don't know how to put something in the grade book, to, no, I need to first begin by better communicating with my students.
I love it. So let's talk about Christine Witcher. Christine Witcher is a technology and innovation specialist for grades 5 through 12. She teaches middle school science, and she actually manages a makerspace at Forest Ridge, which is an all-girls school in Washington. She's also the co-founder and product manager of Floop EDU, which is an ed tech startup that creates equitable feedback tools that save teachers time and teaches students to actively engage with feedback. She's super passionate about technology and using technology to hack teaching and learning. We dive a lot into that quite a bit during this episode. She shares the story of Floop and where they came from and what they've been doing with it, which was really, really cool to hear how they took a problem that was happening in her classroom and turned it into a solution, and how that came about. So I'm super excited for you to hear that and listen to her story. Ray, you already touched on so much of the awesomeness in this episode. Any other little pieces or specific things that you want everyone to listen to as we're getting into this episode?
I just hope that your takeaway from this podcast is not just feeling inspired, but feeling like this is an area of growth. I don't know how your feedback is right in this moment, but it can be improved regardless of where you are on the spectrum. So let's take this as a reminder this August that we're going to improve our feedback.
And with that, let's get into episode 94 with Christine Witcher. Hey, what's up? It's Jeff. We're going to get right back to the episode, but how does $50 sound? Head over to teachbetterconference.com, look for the 2-day registration, put in a discount code, podcast talk, and you're going to save yourself $50 off registration. We're going to see you November 8th and 9th at the Teach Better Conference. And right now, let's get back to the episode. All right, we are here and we're talking with Christine Witcher. And Christine, it is so exciting and awesome to have you on to Teach Better Talk and chat with you today. Appreciate you taking some time. You and I, we were able to connect. I feel like it was not long ago, but actually now I'm thinking about it, I think it was a good month or so ago.
It was, yeah.
I had a great chat with you and Melanie and talking about Floop and you guys, just sort of your journey and stuff. So we'll probably dive into that a little bit today as well. So just really excited to have you on. But before we get going anywhere, I just want to ask you, how you feeling today?
Feeling really good. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, Christine, we're going to have some great conversation. I've heard amazing things about you and Floop and everything in between. So I'm stoked that you chose to come on Teach Better Talk. I want to start for a minute, kind of focused on you and everything that you do. What's a typical response you have for somebody who asks what you do for a living?
Yeah, so I've been teaching a wide variety of STEM middle school classes for about 8 years now. And this was actually the first year that I went on special assignment as a tech and innovation specialist at my school, while also still teaching some middle school classes. And then outside of school, I'm product manager and co-founder for a small ed tech startup called Floop, which is short for Feedback Loop. We make a tool that helps teachers give meaningful feedback faster and teaches students to engage with feedback. And I love that work because I get to combine my interest in feedback and feedback literacy with my obsession for hacking education with technology.
How cool is that?
It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun. So let's just go right there. Let's talk about Floop for a second. Let's just go that
Yeah.
direction. You sort of touched on it with the feedback and loop. Can you give us sort of a little more of a rundown of how Floop works and what it is for teachers?
Yeah, totally. So Floop started in my own classroom, where I was finding that I was just drowning in piles of work, knowing that it was really important to give feedback to my students. And the best way I knew to do that was to just collect their work every day and mark it up and hand it back. And then I was noticing that either I was handing it back so late that the kids didn't care about that feedback anymore. Like, it took me so long to get through all of it that they were just throwing it in the recycle bin, or they would read the feedback and get upset and then, toss it and not want to use it. And I felt like there had to be this better way. And I started working with a colleague of mine, and then met up with another teacher from a local school. And we realized we were all kind of dealing with the same problem and wanted to use technology in some capacity to sort of meet that challenge of needing to regain some of our time in the classroom, but also wanting to help kids actually learn how to use feedback to make meaningful revision to both their learning and their work. And so fast forward a couple of years, now we have a web-based and mobile app that lets students submit their work. And I think one of the coolest parts about it is they can submit any type of work. So they can snap a picture of handwritten math homework or engineering diagrams or artwork from an art course and submit it to Floop. And then the teacher can spot annotate, and every spot annotation opens up a new conversation. So students are able to really in the moment, inquire back to the teacher, what did you mean when you said this? Or would this work? And the teacher can respond in kind. And then we also have a peer review tool built in so that students can have a scaffolded way of giving each other feedback. And now that I've been using it in my classroom for a good 2 years, I'm seeing really phenomenal differences in the way that students seek out feedback, use it to learn, give each other feedback. They've really become the drivers of their learning in that regard, which is so cool.
So this is okay. So it started with you as a problem that you felt that you had, that you were feeling. You realized some other people were having it, so you found a solution. What was it that made you? Was there a point that you thought about it, or did it just kind of happen where you started to share that out with other teachers and pushing the app out to others?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had started with just prototypes using Google spreadsheets and Google Docs, and trying to kind of hack something tech-wise together. And we started to see in our classrooms really positive change coming from using that technology. But we realized it's really hard to share a hacked spreadsheet, right? You have to send so many instructions along with it, we'll change this cell and do this. And so it was really when we had a web-based prototype that we were able to share out broader, that we were we have to give this out to the world, right? This is something that can really change both student and teacher lives in classrooms across the world. And we wanted other teachers to see the benefit of having a really feedback-rich classroom. And so that moment when we had something that was sort of tech stable to share, we were really jazzed to share it out big.
So was the reason for trying to create the reason for creating the app and everything was for the purpose of sharing this hack that you had come up with, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what I'm hitting at is that solving the problem for yourself sounds, if I'm hearing you right, wasn't enough for you. You saw then the benefits and wanted to make sure that went out to others, correct?
Yep, exactly. Awesome. Exactly. Yeah, we were seeing really, really measurable, noticeable difference in our students' confidence and enjoyment of the class, but also their content knowledge and their skills were improving, and it was something we could measure. And we were we can't be greedy with this, right? This is, it's both a way of teaching and learning and also a tech solution to support that way of teaching and learning, that we wanted to make sure that as many teachers as possible got their hands on.
And see, Ray, this is why when after I spoke with and had a hangout with Christine and Melanie, I got so excited about it, is because it's the same way Teach Better Team started with the grid method in Chad's class and doing that. I just love that, because it's one thing to find a solution for yourself, but that drive to have to share it out and to go through all the prototyping and figuring out and all the time and energy and cost that it took to put together the app and stuff because you were just driven to help others and increase that impact. I love it. That's my favorite part. So all right, so let's flip. So one thing we talk about a lot on this podcast is failure, which I know, having been, with this app, there's certainly been there, but also just being a teacher, there's things that happen every day that we have to go through. So can you take us to a time and share a story with us that you've had a failure, that's something you've had to overcome? Kind of share what happened, how did you overcome it, what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 2015-16 school year, a couple of years ago, was my third year of teaching an 8th grade physical science course that I'm now actually feel quite confident with. But at the time, I had started my career co-teaching that course with this veteran retired teacher who was amazing and engaging, and the students loved him, but he also just was not super interested in assessment. So I was sort of piecing together in that one school year what a complete class should look like. And the summer before, I had started this course at the University of Washington called the Physics by Inquiry Summer Institute, which is a 3-year program where teachers learn how to run an inquiry-based science classroom by engaging in inquiry-based learning themselves. And it's pretty intensive, and I came out of it just like jazzed. Like I was like, inquiry instruction is amazing. It's the only way to run a science classroom, and I have to do this. So I like overhauled every lesson, every system, every assessment that I had previously developed, and I just sauntered into that classroom the first day, like so confident that this was going to be a game-changing instructional strategy and that my students were going to love it and they were going to learn so much. And then by winter, my students were so clearly unhappy with the class. They ranged from like some of them just sort of patiently tolerating the class to others just completely disengaging, and some students just being like outright defiant of the things that I was asking them to do. And so I did what I always tend to do in these situations. I just Googled it furiously, like started typing all the things into Google, like my students don't like my class. And I found that I was experiencing something that researchers actually call student resistance. And the symptoms I was seeing just matched the literature perfectly, right? That some students were refusing to engage with learning tasks. Some were blaming their poor academic performance on my teaching. Many of them were disrupting class, even just in like the way of trying to get me off topic really frequently. And some were even rallying other students to join in on these behaviors. And I felt really stuck. I thought I was teaching with good pedagogy. It came from a place of being really, researched in what was going to work. And it was just a total flop. So hoping to get to the root of the issue, and I think this is actually like the crux of the lessons learned from this story. So hoping to get to the root of the issue, I conducted an anonymous survey of my students to get their feedback. I asked a lot of questions about their perceptions of my instruction, assessment systems, the quality of the feedback they were receiving, and just generally how they felt about the class. And after getting all the results back in, I sat down at my computer, I combed through the results, and I almost quit teaching that day. Some of the things that the students had said were coming from anger and frustration. And like, it was so clear that they were unhappy with what was happening in the class. So I took a lot of breaks. I ranted, I ate some ice cream. I realized that actually what my students were telling me wasn't just that they were angry. They were telling me exactly how to be a better teacher. And I sort of categorized all of the feedback, and I realized that the two sort of trends were they were asking for fair assessment with better feedback, and they were asking for agency over their learning. They wanted to feel like they had control of how they did in that class. So over the last 3 years, I've been working really hard to try to create that classroom that they were asking for, and I think I've come closer. And the big takeaway from this failure, something that has really been the hallmark of my teaching for the last couple of years, is that I have to ask my students every day what they need, and I need to listen to them when they tell me what they need.
Oh, I love that. I love how you phrase that. What they were really doing when they were telling you how to teach, but they were literally giving you the answers to the problems that you were having and doing that. So that's awesome. I love you sharing that. Let's flip it now. Okay. Let's talk about a successful moment. This can be something big, something small, but tell us what happened. Why was it a success for you? And then what did you take away from that?
Yeah, so my success was this last school year, and it actually is the same 8th grade science course that I had such a hard time with a couple of years ago. And going into this last school year, I did something that I felt was actually really radical, although some other teachers might just be like, that's pretty normal, but it was inspired by the Teachers Throwing Out Grades movement, which, by the way, has an amazing Facebook group, which I really recommend everybody checking out. But so what I did was I switched my grading system in that science class entirely to self-assessment. Students were giving themselves their own grades on every assessment. And I was super cautious about this switch after the burn of that 2015-16 school year. So I scaffolded the hell out of it. Like, I made sure I identified every skill, every resource that my students would need in order to be able to accurately self-assess. I read a ton of books about it. I ran my idea past my colleagues. And I also made sure that this was the one big change for my school year, that this was the thing that I could focus on. And the system that we developed for self-assessment, I think, was really successful because it was dependent on two sort of school-wide factors that we have going on at my school. One is that our school really cares about growth mindset, and we talk about it a lot. And that doesn't mean that like we're perfect at growth mindset, but we care about it, and it's part of our vocabulary. And also that the science department that I'm part of is really tightly aligned. We have department-wide policies that are determined through full consensus of the science faculty. We fully adopt them. Everybody buys in. And those policies sort of focus around the ideas that students need to do science every day. They should have agency over their learning, and that agency comes from understanding the expectations of the class, understanding where they are in meeting the expectations, and then having ample opportunities to meet those expectations along the way. And I think all those pieces are really important for the success of the self-assessment sort of experiment that I did this year, because by the time I get the 8th graders in my class, the vast majority of them have been in our science program for 2 to 3 years. So they have this, they've built up this sort of toolbox of skills around agency and feedback literacy that mean that they're coming in really ready to rock the system that I've put in place. So all of the teachers 5th through 8th grade in our science department focus a lot on teaching something called feedback literacy, which I think I've mentioned already, but it's essentially how to be emotionally open to feedback, knowing how to access feedback on demand when you need it, either from yourself or your peers or your teacher, and then knowing how to use that feedback to learn once you get it. And we've added in this other element of feedback-based learning, which is agency to act, like having sort of an avenue to take this new realization or new learning that you have due to feedback and put it in place and like get credit for the work that you've done along that way. So we make sure that students have access to the feedback they need, that they have opportunities to resubmit their work in response to feedback, that they have ways of like meeting with us outside of class if they need that, so that by the time my students submit their final work and I give them like detailed feedback, they know how to use it to give themselves a grade. Like they have context for what the expectations were by the time they get there. And so I ask them to give themselves a grade. I also ask them, once they've gotten that feedback and given themselves a grade, to defend the grade that they gave themselves, to tell me how they feel about it, that emotional piece, and to make a game plan for moving forward. So I try to really scaffold all that like executive functioning sort of stuff that needs to happen in the self-assessment process. So here's sort of the big success of this whole change. Right at the end of the school year, I was talking to my friend and office mate, Shelly, who teaches our 5th and 6th grade science classes. And I was talking about just how excited I was that my 8th graders were really accurately self-assessing at that point at the end of the year, that like the grades they were picking for themselves were spot on with what I would have picked. And so I was doing that thing that I think a lot of teachers do, where I was questioning whether their awesomeness was because of like me and the class and the things I had put in place, or whether it was just their general awesomeness. And I think the answer is it's always a combination, right? But so Shelly stopped me and she read me a self-assessment of one of her 5th graders, where she had asked that 5th grader, based on your feedback from the quiz, how do you think you did on the learning targets and how do you know? And that student said back to her, I did well. I know I did well because I feel really good about it. And this kid had just like totally skipped over her feedback and just answered the questions based on her feelings that were just disconnected from the evidence. And that's such a human thing to do, to just base your perception on how you feel rather than what you're seeing or reading. And that was such a good reminder that feedback literacy, it's a learned skill. It takes time. It takes consistent instruction to learn it. And my 8th graders, they'd finally gotten there. They knew how to assess themselves, which meant they were ready to be independent learners through high school and beyond. And that was really affirming that the hard work that our department is doing, it matters, right? That focusing on not just teaching science content and science skills, but also teaching these sort of affective and executive functioning skills is so important. And the fact that we value growth-oriented, feedback-based learning over this content obsession, it means our kids do better. And they also happen to learn the content better too.
Christine, I think I could listen to you all day long. Like, I just think that I want to permanently schedule a phone call with you, an hour phone call, 3 times a week, where you just get to talk to me and inspire me and tell me what like my next steps are and how I'm going to grow. Like, I really think that you're going to be my next like mental trainer. Can we make that happen?
Yes, let's do it. In fact, I just found out that I'm teaching high school algebra next year, so I'm going to need some math mentorship. So
there we go.
Yeah.
See, look, Ray can add some sort of value too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Christine, everything you've said has just struck so many chords with me. And it's not just the stories you're sharing. It's your approach. It's the reflection. It's the focus on students. It's the continuous kind of mindset that what we're doing in education isn't about us, and it's about our kids and how can we do it better. And throughout all that, you continuously are echoing this need that you have to keep growing, even though it's evident throughout all of your stories so far that you've done an immense amount of growing over the past few years, and you really have an expertise in an area that you're still saying, hey, I might be an expert in this area, but I still have way more to learn. So learn with me. I think that passion that can kind of ooze out of even your tone is something so special. So I appreciate that about you. I'm confident our listeners right now are kind of sitting back, like jaw dropped, saying, okay, hold on. I have to rewind and listen to that again because I want to make sure I soaked it all in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you. And, I have to say, this has not always been the way that I've approached teaching. In fact, my first couple of years of teaching, I think, as we all are in the beginning, sort of naively confident in my own sort of control of the classroom, or like, I don't know the right word, but I felt like I knew better than my students, right? Like I had this confidence that if they were unhappy about something, it was because they hadn't figured it out yet. And that it really took that big year of failure for me to look at my teaching and say, like, I don't know better than they do what they need. I might know the research better. I might know the strategies and the content better, but they know what they need in the moment. And that taking the time to step back and just listen to our kids, it makes such a difference in the way we teach.
So if you were talking to a teacher, which by the way, you are right now, but if you were talking to a teacher and you were sharing all this insight, what would be like your number one, I don't mean to limit it to one, but just like, what is the number one piece of advice that you want them to know if they are an educator who's listening to you and just wants to get on the Christine train? Like, what do they need?
Yeah, I think probably understanding that feedback is a conversation is the biggest thing, that recognizing that feedback is in the context of a classroom and learning, feedback is a two-way conversation between you and each student. So you give them a task, they do the task, and that gives you feedback on what they know. And then you give them feedback on where they should go next, and they tell you how they're feeling about that. And you respond with a new opportunity to refine their thinking or whatever, right? That it's this give and take. that's the biggest piece. And that's actually true of feedback across the spectrum, that when we have feedback with our colleagues, that should be a conversation. How can I be a better teacher and how can I help you? Well, here's some resources. Try this. What did you think? Right? It's that way in our interpersonal relationships and mentorship relationships, that it should always be an ongoing conversation.
Awesome. So let's keep this conversation ongoing.
Yeah.
Ray, I think that's the worst one I've ever done right there. That was bad.
Yeah, that was pretty cheesy. She's literally like sharing gold glitter with everyone, and you're like, "Oh yeah, here's my amateur one-liner."
I'm normally
that
pretty
was good
good
feedback to you.
Well, see, that's what I was gonna say. So I'm normally pretty good about this like transition and making it very like sort of dad jokey type.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna need some feedback on how bad that one was. It wasn't even like normally they're so bad that they're good. Or at least I think they are. That was just weak. So we're going to just cut all this out and move on. So we're going to do the next 6 questions, though. We're going to do them. And your goal, Christina, is to answer each one in 15 seconds or less. You ready to roll?
Oh, boy. Let's do it.
All right. What is one ed tech tool you cannot live without?
In the science classroom, slow motion cell phone cameras. And then also Floop, right? The feedback tool.
Love it. What's a book you're reading right now?
In prep for next year, I'm reading Joe Bowler's What's Math Got to Do with It?
Nice. Who do we need
I
to
feel
follow?
like you should sing that, by the way. Don't you?
Go, Ray. We're waiting.
Yeah, you take that one. I don't need to
I would be really good at it, but I'm gonna save everyone's day by not singing for them. I just
Are you gonna claim? Are you claiming that it's like what your shoulder hurts, so you can't sing?
Yeah, like, ow, I'm in a sling, so my vocals.
Okay. Who do we need to follow on Twitter today?
I would follow 2 feedback researchers. So Dr. Naomi Winstone out of the UK is at Doc Winstone, and David Carlis is at Carlis David. And they both share on a daily basis feedback research that is super useful.
What's a good YouTube channel or website for educators?
For science teachers, I love thewondersofscience.com. It's a NGSS-aligned inquiry and phenomena-based lesson bank.
Give us a daily, weekly, or monthly routine every teacher should get into.
Once a month, I recommend that you reflect on what you dread the most in your practice and figure out how to hack it. So what can you eliminate? What can you delegate? What can you automate? And how can you spend your energy in ways that matter?
Wow, that's awesome routine. Give us the best piece of advice you've ever received.
So Brene Brown once shared this quote: "I can't know if people are doing the best they can or not, but when I assume people are doing the best they can, it makes my life better." So I take that to mean like have strong personal boundaries so that you can make really generous assumptions about other people.
Ray, your feedback?
Oh my gosh, Christine, you're my favorite human on the planet.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so... Okay, here's what I want to go on record with, and Jeff, don't get mad. We'll figure it out. It's not more work for you. Christine, you and I need to go live in our private Facebook group and like talk, because you have so much to share. I think that our private group, we've talked a lot about feedback over the past few weeks during our summer series. Like, you would be such a great resource to talk through some of this stuff. I want to make that happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
Nice. Well, hi, Jeff. So it was really good. Is that good feedback?
That's great feedback. I'm good.
Great.
I'm in line with that.
I love it. All right. Well, Christine, I think I'm like really sad that our episode is ending, because I have loved recording with you, learning with you. I always say like, this won't be the end, but really, like, watch out. I'm going to contact you in like 13 minutes and we're going to talk more. But I want to make sure that our listeners also hop on the train and keep in contact with you. Maybe they'll even join our private Facebook group, and then they could be a part of our conversation. I think that would be really fun. So would you mind sharing how people can get in contact with you?
Yes. So on Twitter, we are at FloopEDU, FLOOP EDU. Our blog is blog.floopedu.com. And then definitely check out floopedu.com. We're a team of full-time teachers trying to build a feedback platform that helps students learn to engage with feedback, and which works in tons of classrooms. So check us out.
Awesome. And you can find all the links, resources, and everything we talked about in this episode over at teachbetter.com, as well as those really important links for connecting with Christina and the entire Floop team over there. So make sure you head over and get the show notes over at teachbetter.com for all of that. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And if you can give us a rating and review, we'd really appreciate that. I know Ray's a big fan of that 5-star review, so head on over and make sure you get one of those going.
Hey Jeff.
What?
Who's not a fan of the 5-star review? Why are you saying like I'm the only one?
Because typically when you have requested people to give a rate and review, you say that. So that's why I said that.
Well, I mean, I am a fan, but like, aren't you a fan? I mean, I'm not like on my island over here.
I am, but I've also said in the past that if they give us a rate and review, Ray would really appreciate that. I would as well, but I like to say Ray would.
Okay, fine.
Why
Keep
are you
going.
busting my chops right now, Ray? Like, what's going on here? I thought I was good on this episode. Christine, you can back me up. I don't think I wasn't tormenting you. I wasn't giving you any problem. Was I, Ray?
Friendly.
But then here she is, Christine. This is you. You get to see and hear what I have to deal with on a daily basis.
Whatever.
It's a hostile work environment that I'm in. It's really not fair.
Finish up this ending so our listeners can go on and listen to the next episode.
What I was going to say was, let's also take it one step further and think of just 3 of your colleagues who need to hear these amazing stories and share this podcast with them. Christine, it's been super awesome to have you on. Really excited. Glad you were able to come on and share some of your stories with us and the way you think about things. And I love the idea that it sounds like we're going to be bringing you into the private Facebook group to maybe do some really cool exclusive training in there and share your stories in there. So super excited. Just a huge thank you from us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.
And until next time, let's get out there and let's teach better.